Welcome back to Deviatus. This week I'm going to have some follow-up discussion with Chris Wolford. We left some things in limbo to some extent with our discussion involving more current events. We're going to be touching base on topics like Tom Delonge, the terrifying concept of gangstalking and how it's being utilized today, and some very interesting high strangeness that's getting a little too personal for my comfort here in San Diego. But before getting into my discussion with Chris, I do have an important update to share. If you heard the most recent episode on the alleged UFO photos from the USS Trepang, there have been some new findings. Each week I try to bring you content with the challenge of forming your own conclusions based on the information provided. Occasionally, these accounts that I review bring light to new information that we're forced to consider. While I clearly stated that the UFO photos discussed last time appeared to be authentic, we have some reason to doubt that now, at least regarding one of the photos. I have to send a shout out to Michael Huntington for pointing this out to me on the Deviatus Facebook page. The Black Vault article that I cited for some of the information provided on that particular episode has been updated. A UFO researcher posted a discovery made by Wim van Utrecht about the very first photo from the magazine. He points out two sections of the smoke in the photograph appear to be utilizing a cloning effect where patterns of smoke are identical in the top and bottom areas of the photo. I have to say, once this flaw is pointed out, it's hard to understand how it didn't jump out to anybody before this point. It's definitely a huge disappointment. I still hold to my opinion that the appearance of the objects being photographed vary in resemblance from a target balloon, but the major problem, of course, now is that one of the photos has been altered. How can we trust the authenticity of any of the photos? It'd be really great if we knew the source of these photos to be able to riddle them with questions, but when these things are submitted anonymously, we don't really have much choice. All of this makes you wonder if someone's sitting by laughing at the debate these photos kindled, and what motivations someone would have to pull off a hoax like this. In any case, I felt an obligation to follow up on this new development and let you know when I heard about it, and I continue to urge you to derive your own conclusions. If you're like me, then every once in a while, as in this case, I believe my own personal conclusions deserve to be amended. One more important note before getting into my discussion with Chris. I just want to forewarn you that part of our discussion includes a photograph I was given, but I never received official permission to post it publicly. I wasn't sure why at the time, thinking it was a really great photo of a potential ghost. The circumstances surrounding this picture have changed a lot, and that's a huge understatement. You'll learn the specifics of those circumstances from our conversation in this episode, but I have chosen at this time to go ahead and share it in the show notes for this episode on my website at deviatus.com. There are a couple reasons for this. First, I'm still abiding by the wishes of the person who gave me the photo to avoid sharing exactly where it was taken, even though I'm personally aware of where that was, and have even been there. He also never told me who really took the photo, and now I have no way of finding out. For these reasons, I want to invite any independent source to examine the photo for evidence of tampering or photoshopping of any kind. I certainly don't want a repeat of what we just went through with the USS Trepang photos. I apologize for being so vague, but hopefully you'll understand after hearing the full extent of our discussion. So let me know your opinions about the photo. And without further ado, let's catch up with Chris Wolford. Well, I guess I just kind of wanted to follow up. I don't have any, long thought out questions or anything like that, but I just kind of want to get an update from you because I know our episode just aired recently, but we actually had that conversation quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And I know you were kind of getting towards some stuff near the end there that you weren't quite ready to talk about, but I want to pick your brain and see what you might be prepared to open up to today.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, I mean, I guess I don't know if you've got any more on the Tom Delonge thing. I feel like he's been kind of quiet on social media, but
just yesterday he posted something on Instagram where he had said that he was going to be meeting with somebody from Area 51.
Okay.
As far as Tom DeLonge and this announcement, the last I had heard, and this was a month ago, is it was going to happen now in July. Well, we're now in July. I have no idea. The other thing I've been hearing, little rumblings, is the date July 20th. And the reason why that's important is that's the date that the movie Contact came out in 1997. And the group that is kind of in bed with DeLonge, but also doing their own thing, supposedly. And again, whether I believe this or not, I don't know. I'm just telling you what I've been told. Mm-hmm. They have chosen that day for whatever reason, because obviously that movie Contact is near and dear to them. And they will disclose certain things. I don't know. I know the one person that is on in that group and also in DeLonge's camp is oh gosh, it just skipped my brain. The guy, not this. Robert Bigelow. Why can't I think?
Okay.
Robert Bigelow is the guy who is basically on both teams or groups, I should say. Mm-hmm. He's a secret financial backer of Tom DeLonge. One of the financial backers, I should say, because DeLonge's got quite a few. Because he can do it just with his own money. I mean, he could finance a little bit, but not what the huge scope that he wants to do this entire project, the Secret Machines thing with. Right. So
now,
we can talk. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to ask if you've read his book or if you've heard any more, I guess, about it. Yeah. If you haven't read it, or
no, I have. I'm weird with reading books. I don't typically read from front to back. I'll just go into the book and find sections that speak to me, and I'll read that, and then it will make me want to go back and reread. So as far as the Tom DeLonge, the Gods book with Pierre Lavenda, the part or the parts in the book that do something for me are the part that is relation to the Serpent Mounds in Ohio, and how they're astronomically aligned to certain constellations, and that the people who were there, the Native Americans that were there in the Ohio Valley, who built the Serpent Mounds, were told this by a group. I don't know who they are. You could say aliens. I'm not very confident in that, because I don't know if it really was. But it wasn't another set of humans, because they did not have that knowledge to do what they did. And that's the thing that I think anthropology, modern day science, some archaeologists, they're having a real hard time trying to explain away, well, the Native Americans, they had X, Y, and Z, and they could do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, to a limited degree, not to what the degree of what the Serpent Mounds represents. Also, I found from another researcher who told me to look into this, is that whole entire area where the Serpent Mounds is in Ohio, is littered with meteorites, obviously from outer space, that contain all kinds of materials that would not be obviously found here on Earth. And when I dug into that, I found it to be true. It's one of the areas in the country that there's a high proportion of meteorites that impacted, that survived, and that people have either gotten or have been able to look at. So that's interesting. How that is, I don't know, but he had made mention of that to me, so I looked into it, and I thought that was worth mentioning. But that part, and the other part of the book that spoke to me was the fact that in the book, it doesn't specifically say, but it hints towards what we're dealing with in regards to this phenomenon is like magic and their abilities to do certain things. And that, for me personally, is the research I'm into right now the most. To figuring out that in this ether of time and space and all this, there is this magic. It's weird. I tried a little experiment about 3 months ago. And obviously, when you dabble with magic, I'm not talking about black magic, but I'm talking when you just deal with chaos magic or you're dealing with um, esoteric topics like magic, you kind of have to be careful because you don't know what you don't know what you're opening yourself up to. So this experiment of mine is trivial to probably you, but to me it spoke volumes because all I did, because I had read a book about chaos magic, and all I did was ask the universe to do this one favor for me for that day. I was going into work and I wanted to see if this would hold true, and it did. I asked basically that there'd be no more cases, because I work in a hospital, that there would be no more cases. The only case that was boarded on Friday would stay that way, and there would be no more boarded cases. And I know some people would say that's just coincidence. It didn't happen. We didn't get any add-ons, and it happened. But then weird things happened to me personally and in my house, like poltergeist events. Not too bad, nothing like opening drawers or banging pots or pans, but even my wife had seen black shadow figures. My daughter all of a sudden said that she's seen a monster. Obviously, she's 2.5 years old, going on 3. I've never mentioned the word monster to her. Obviously, that could come from TV, but I don't remember having her watch anything that would say monster. So that, to me personally, signified that whatever I tapped into definitely was real, not only because of the experiment of not having that case or any cases added on, but because I had all these other events in the house. Now, since that time, they've kind of diminished. But for a good couple weeks after that, asking the universe for this, things picked up, and then now they've diminished. So that was just interesting. So the part in Tom DeLonge's book talking about magic was interesting to me because I think that's an area that some UFO researchers need to look at.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure. You said you didn't have any sort of experiences like with the shadow figures or anything like that before you tried your experiment, right?
No. This house is a brand new house. No issues whatsoever. No, nothing. I mean, it's a brand new house. It doesn't. I mean, it makes noises every once in a while, but they're house noises. They're settling. We built this house. We built this house in 2014. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. And like I said, when you open yourself up to this, I know from other researchers and doing my own thing and my wife knowing this kind of stuff, when you acknowledge it, it becomes more amplified. So we just decided to err on the air of caution and just don't acknowledge it. Outside the house, we could say, yes, we saw that or heard that, and we went on our merry way. We didn't dwell on it, and it really has basically now to the point where it's not even anything's going on. So I'm not freaked out. But that was probably the one and only time I'll do the experiment like that again. I just wanted to see if that could happen. Now, I have thought that I wanted to go to maybe even the Serpent Mounds, but like I think I told you that area up in the thumb of Michigan, I had the experience with my wife. Mm-hmm. I had thought about doing something similar, asking whatever this is to see a UFO and see if that would happen. Because I have a hunch that could possibly be a thing where maybe one could come on demand. I don't know. I know that there's people that can do that. In fact, I got done talking to the Michigan MUFON state director about this fall. He had found it funny that I had mentioned that, that people can see UFOs on demand because he's an abductee, but he can, he doesn't see UFOs every second of every day. But he said when he went to this paranormal conference a couple days actually earlier, there was a psychic who said, "You want to see a UFO come on demand?" And he just thought, "Nah, you're hooey. I know I'm an experiencer, but psychics, they're hooey." So he was like, "You know what? I'll just go see what she's all about." And sure enough, 4 other people, including the state director, saw this woman. Whatever she did mentally, there would be these craft that appeared over Lake Michigan, 4 of them during the day, daylight sighting. So it is possible. So I find that interesting too. We just have to figure out why that is. Why can somebody tap into their psychic ability and do that, or tap into this ether and get shadow figures in their house, or ask for something and it will come true? I don't know. I don't know how to scientifically quantify that. I'm not a scientist. I wouldn't know, but I'm just trying to search for more answers to this riddle and go about it a different way than the typical, I saw this craft and let's log it and let's talk to the witness. I mean, that's all fine and dandy. I'm not against that, but we need to move forward. We need to do some different things going forward with this topic.
So yeah, I think that would be something that could be scientifically tested. I don't know if have you seen that movie on Netflix called The Curse of the Man Who Sees UFOs?
I didn't. I heard people talk about it. I had not seen it yet.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, this guy he's kind of an older guy. He lives in L.A. And I don't necessarily know that he tries to summon them, but he sees them a lot. And the guy's a filmmaker, so he's constantly got cameras, and he'll just go out at night and just start filming, and they'll appear. And to me, that's something that could be. I mean, it's obviously something that this guy can reproduce, but you don't see anybody, scientifically studying this at all. Some of the footage that he has is like, it's okay. Some of it's a little more convincing than others, but he's definitely set up a pattern. Now, I know a lot of people, because I kind of delve into the paranormal investigation type of stuff. I've met several people who have had a number of like shadow people experiences. Like myself, I mean, I've never intentionally called that stuff unless I'm away from my home, and only in the last year or so I'll actually go and start like bringing a recorder and trying to interact. Otherwise, I don't want anything to do with it. But I think that's the thing that's missing from most of this stuff is the reproducibility.
Well, that's the problem. It's the other thing. I mean, you can try to get it to reproduce, and I've had this argument where, like I've said before, science is not going to solve this. I still don't think science is going to solve this. I think they'll be able to test some of it. I would argue that even with Robert Bigelow, with him forming NIDS in the 90s and up into the early 2000s, they gave up because they couldn't reproduce results. They got results, they got certain things to happen, but then when they would go to put cameras or a FLIR camera or have a person be there, nothing would happen. But then the day later, the scientists who didn't have a camera, who wasn't with anybody else, had a profound experience. So I don't know. I will say this. I think all ghost UFOs, even cryptids, it's a singular person type of event. I mean, yes, you do get the cases where multiple people see the event, but really it's an individual type of thing. One person sees one thing, another person sees another thing. Another thing I've really looked into lately in my research also is Gangstalking. with regards to, there's a case out in Michigan, Western Michigan. This woman, I won't say her name, but I do know her personally. Actually, Ryan Sprague features her in his book, Somewhere in the Skies. Mm-hmm. I made mention to her that that's what I thought has happened to her. She initially kind of blew me off, but then when she looked, and also I gave her a couple links to what books to look at for that, she started to think, that is interesting. You do draw some interesting conclusions here with the Gangstalking. Now, what Gangstalking is it's electronic means to annoy, subdue, mute, or in some ways control you. And if you don't believe that the government, or I shouldn't say government because now I'll just look like some tin hat guy, but some kind of agencies, whether they're government paid or not, I don't know. But these agencies, these people, do have technologies that can do this. Now, you're going to say this is pretty interesting. A shadow figure can be made by the Gangstalkers using these electromagnetic weapons. Targeted individuals will see black shadow figures. Why don't I want to say fingers? Figures in their house, or they'll get a like a metallic taste in their mouth, and they'll be hit with an EMF wave so bad that they'll pee blood, and they'll see outside, and it will look like a Martian landscape, but to a person next to them who's not getting that weapon targeted to them, will see just a parking lot. The book that really turned me on to this is a book by Robert Guffey called Cameleo. It's an interesting case. It happened in the early 2000s in San Diego, and there's some really good information in that book. It's not written like a typical conspiracy or UFO book. It's more like a Hunter S. Thompson type of book, where it's telling a narrative story, but you're learning things throughout it. And anyways, going back to the woman in Western Michigan, I had made mention that when I heard that her daughter and her saw two different craft, her mother, I shouldn't say two different craft, what the mother saw and what the daughter had seen and the mother heard and the daughter heard are two different things, but they're looking at the same thing. And I wonder if that was a possible thing where Gangstalking was employed. I do know that this woman has had run-ins with the military and the local police, which anybody who is associated with Gangstalking could be any of those agencies. You will not know. Unfortunately, there's only that one book, Cameleo, that I know of. But Robert Guffey, if you ever get a chance to have him on your show, I would highly recommend it, because it is in relation to UFOs, because some of the stuff they do to these people is pretty wild what they can do. Like I said, they can make you see things that aren't there. The one interesting thing, because Robert Guffey has found out other cases, like there was a woman who lived on this island in Connecticut where she poisoned this dog accidentally because it kept coming into her yard, and it kind of ate something that it shouldn't have. She didn't purposely kill the dog or poison the dog, but it ate something it shouldn't have for her plants. It got into her plants. And what she didn't know is her next door neighbor worked for the NSA. And you could make a leap and say that possibly now she became a target because she had things happen to her where she saw things in her house. She had people follow her. It's just, you would have to, I'm not going to go into telling that story because it's not mine, but it's just an interesting element too that I think UFO researchers need to start to look at. I would think another group that was possibly Gangstalked was Betty and Barney Hill. the more and more I look at that case, I don't feel that it was a genuine abduction. I really don't. I think there's too many red flags. I think there's too many people that they're associated with that are tied to the CIA or the NSA or people who worked for the MK Ultra program during that time. So yeah, UFO researchers definitely need to take a look at that too. I keep promoting that book as much as I can, even though I've never met Robert Guffey. I just have heard him on a podcast, and I bought the book and I read it, and I was like mesmerized because what it can do. Another thing it can do, I forgot to tell you, is basically, you know, the movie Predator.
Yeah.
Where you see the predator and it's kind of like reverse camouflage, where you're seeing what's behind it. Well, they can do that same thing. They have the ability to have that kind of cloaking suit, and they broke into this guy's apartment and basically messed with him for a couple hours until he got so mad he just left, because he was like, I'm not taking this anymore, because this thing would move around his house, and he thought that he was going crazy, but it really was a person in this suit. And later in this book, you find out that one of the scientists who was developing this, comes in contact with Robert Guffey and this gentleman and says, yes, that is definitely what I was working on. And the Navy was definitely interested in my idea, and they basically stole it from me. They took all my information and they stole it from me, and I'm left with nothing. But here is what I do have. And he gave it to Robert Guffey, and Robert Guffey checked it out and said, yeah, you really are a scientist and you really did work on this stuff. So it's interesting. And like I said, not many people are aware of it, but that's where my research lately has taken me.
Yeah. So, I'm looking at the book right now online. It definitely looks interesting. It looks like he's out of Cal State Long Beach, and I'm about maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours from there. I'm in San Diego myself, but this is interesting. I'll definitely pick this up and read it. I kind of got some chills when you had that whole predator description, and only for I've got to kind of tie this into a story here. About, I'd say, maybe 7-8 months ago, I was doing a investigation with this group that I go out with, and basically there was a kind of a newer guy in the group, and I think it was his second time coming, and he basically, pulled me aside before the investigation. He says, hey, I want you to look at something. And I said, okay, and he had on his phone, he had this picture, and it was, he wouldn't tell me who took it, which was kind of concerning.
Okay.
But it was of a hospital. I recognized the hospital. It's one local here in San Diego, and I don't necessarily want to say which one.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I recognized exactly where this photo was, and he says, what do you think of it? And it's basically, it shows this like white misty shape that looks like a person in the middle of this corridor. And I said, well, obviously, I'd like to see it on a bigger screen and analyze it, but it looks really cool, And I said, what can you tell me about it? And he says, well, this is taken by a nurse working on third shift. And basically she said she was walking down this hallway. She's really the only one around. And she saw what looked like the predator that was camouflaged kind of moving in front of her, and she couldn't tell if she like had something in her eye or there was floaties or so she decides to whip out a phone and take an image, and the image on the phone, which he showed me, looked way different than what she saw with her eyes. So I thought that was really interesting. I can share that photo with you. The bad part about this is I was trying to get more information from this guy, because he wouldn't really tell me who the person was that released it. I might have even known the person, I don't know, but he actually passed away in his younger 40s, very, very recently. And
oh man, I got chills, because wait till I tell you about the company that's in your neck of the woods that is making that.
Well, hold on one sec. So
Okay.
I didn't get to go to his funeral. I actually had to work that day. But I was asking other members in the group like what he did, and they said, I don't know, something with the FBI. He was, I guess he was
Oh my God.
a field agent who he hurt his back. He had a back injury really early on in his career, and he basically had a desk job. His wife didn't know exactly what he did, though. And I don't know. I just thought the whole thing was interesting. So when you just told me about that, it was kind of like, ooh, it gives me a little goosebumps.
Well, funny you say that. You definitely need to buy Camilio now, because you will probably be freaked out and probably want to move from San Diego, because that place is a hotbed of just what they do is they pick. And again, this is, like I said, this happened in the early 2000s, right prior to the invasion of Iraq. I believe, because in the book, and Robert Guffey kind of points towards this, is they would target people who had drug problems or homeless people to use this technology on. And they would mess with them and mess with them. And that's another thing. Gangstalking, it never goes away. It comes in waves. Like, you'll think it will go away for a couple months, and then right back the next day, it's more intense than ever. And they may not use the predator cloaking technology. They may use the EMF. They may just use two agents that come to your house and bug you or follow you to work and beat you up, and just crazy stuff. Or another thing that this guy in the book, the guy who is targeted, he got so pissed. I don't know. Do you have 7-Elevens over there? I think you do.
Yeah, we do.
He went into a 7-Eleven, and these two guys were following him in there, and he was like, you know what? I just want you guys to leave me alone. He said that right to their face, and they didn't say a word. They just looked at him. They had the crew cut. They looked like intimidating, the typical military haircut, just, exuding military. And he got pissed, and he went and grabbed a big gulp, filled it up with slushy mix, and threw it at him, and they didn't flinch, and he just walked out. And they left, but they didn't do anything. But that's what the kind of stuff that they will do. And in San Diego, so the company, SAIC, now I don't know. Yeah, I do. Yeah, SAIC is in San Diego, and they were right down the street from where this person lived. And this is where the scientists said most of the stuff was being developed at. And yeah, that's right in your neck of the woods. And another thing, Tom Delonge, he's in San Diego, so I wonder if I don't know, but it is interesting that San Diego keeps popping up over and over and over again. Now, I guess this guy has moved to Minnesota or Wisconsin, I can't remember, since then. Robert Guffey's still in San Diego area. But yeah, it's definitely very interesting what they can do to people who basically piss off the government or whoever. I don't know. I mean, it could be elements within the government. I know this is not a conspiracy show in the least bit, but when you do go into paranormal or even UFO topics, you are going to butt up against the kind of conspiracy or the kind of weird stuff. So it is interesting that she took it, or somebody took it in a hospital. Who's to say this person was some, I don't know, vagabond or something that was just in the hospital because he had been targeted, and they came and visited him in the hospital because they know that they're not really going to be seen, or even if they are, no big deal, because nobody was going to believe them when they see it, because it's too, I mean, if you tell somebody I saw kind of like the Predator, nobody's going to believe you. They're going to say, ha, 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 get to the chopper. They're not really going to believe you. So yeah, people definitely need to look at that. So that is a crazy story. Thank you for sharing that with me. But he died under oh man, that's...
Yeah, I don't know how he ended up passing away. I mean, obviously, I think he was in the ICU a few days. That's all I know. And really, we didn't want to. I wasn't like close friends with him, but at the same time, I didn't know him, and.
But that's so weird that this is a paranormal group, right?
Right, and I mean, this guy's my age, and he was just in a lot better shape than I was, and And
he just showed up, and he had come there before.
Yeah, so he basically, I think he had been one time previously, And then the guy had his own equipment, which was strange because normally we meet in this group and they have like a website or a meetup.com page, and, they get 20 to 30 people and we break out into groups and kind of, travel around whatever destination we're at.
Yeah.
And this guy was the only guy that would bring his own equipment. And he had everything. I mean, he had the, full spectrum cameras. He had EMF readers.
Wow.
He had a lot of cool gadgets that the team didn't even have. And, he came, it was like our joke with him. His name was Dan. And, he came and he wore this like, tack vest, and we're like, what are you wearing? And he's like, oh, it's my FBI. Like, I thought he was joking the whole time, I didn't realize he was actually in the FBI. Like, it was an actual tactical vest that he used. And, I mean, he was no longer a field agent. But I don't know. It's just the whole thing's kind of crazy.
Yeah, those FBI agents, they tend to die under some weird circumstances. Well, but that's crazy.
I'm looking at this SAIC website, and I mean, I've heard of it before. They're kind of big in the market here. There's been a lot in the papers about them, but I'm in healthcare too, so I've not really looked into it. But it sounds like they're like a civilian contractor.
Yes, they are. That works for the government, and they just got one of the largest contracts. One of their subsidiaries got one of the largest contracts to provide scientific tools, analyses, scientists. I don't remember off the top of my head, but to Antarctica.
That's interesting. I just have, it's not aired yet. Tomorrow I'm going to air the episode about the USS Trepang and that whole UFO thing. Purely speculation. I'm not interviewing anybody on that, but you've been hearing a lot about Antarctica lately. So I just shot you that image on Twitter.
All right, very good. Thank you so much again, Jeremy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we can kind of go through the image. I may end up just posting this. I feel really bad because I never got permission to.
I would. I don't know that I would because honestly, I'm just speaking to you as a friend. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because I'm deadly serious when I mean they will target you, and obviously I know that sounds like I'm kind of like trying to say that they will and that they're behind every nook and cranny. It would be better just to send it to me there and whatever, and I just don't open yourself up to that because who knows kind of rabbit hole that goes down,
Yeah.
I mean that's, and before we're done I'll tell you about my spook story, and basically that's why I'm kind of like cooled on trying to join any Michigan MUFON or any group like that. I just do my own thing and I'm not worried about what people think of me. I don't really care.
Yeah.
Well,
let me at least kind of, I guess, describe what's going through my head as I look at it, and I'll kind of let you know what I asked and all that. I don't know if have you seen it in front of you yet?
Hold on one second.
Okay. Well, while you're pulling it up, I'll kind of just describe it. And basically, it's obviously in a hospital. The picture was taken from a lit corridor looking down a corridor that has some lights off, which kind of correlates to the whole third shift story. Usually hospitals will do that to save power. So in asking...
Jeremy, this looks exactly what Damien saw.
Yeah?
Yeah, the legs would cut out. You kind of couldn't see the legs, but yeah, that is crazy. Holy bejesus. You just gave me friggin' chills.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's exactly what I was thinking when you told me about this, though. I'm like, wow, it sounds exactly like what this description was. So at first, the guy just showed me the picture. He's like, "What do you think?" And I'm looking at the image, and it's hard to tell. I mean, obviously, it looks like it's within probably 15, 20 feet from the camera. I see shadow projected behind it, which means it's blocking out light. I'm looking, and there's one of those mirror bubbles on the ceiling right above it. and it's really hard to see if you can see its reflection in that. And I think that was one of my concerns about the picture, but also, like, if you zoom in that much, it's really low resolution. So I said, well, what do you know about the phone? Because, if I take my iPhone out, I'm going to be able to zoom in like crazy. And
exactly.
He said this was an older flip phone that they give the nurses, to communicate with one another. It's not like an expensive modern phone. It's just one of those cheap ones.
Yeah, I've heard like that in healthcare. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's looking at it. It looks convincing to me just with the shadow play and the. I know exactly where this is.
The only person that I could point you towards to take a look at that is Mark Dan Antonio, or there's a few people on Facebook that are image experts, that really are image experts. And if you want, I can hook you up, or if you want to just leave it be, you could leave it be.
No, I'd be more than willing to pass it on. I guess, I have a little uneasiness about letting it go just because I never got permission.
Trust me, I get it. I totally get it, because you have to kind of be wary of things like that,
right?
Because then people start asking questions, and yeah, I get it.
Well, I'm interested to hear about this spook that visited you.
Okay, so this happened. I would say right before the election. So that Tuesday, it was that weekend before the election. So that would have been early October or early November. I can't remember. So because the election was on November 8th, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, so it was that Saturday before the election. I was asked earlier that week by the state director of Michigan MUFON if I would like to join him and a few people. He didn't say who. Initially, he didn't say who was going to be joining him at this kind of like dive bar in an area of Michigan that's just south of Flint. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Flint water. Do I really want to drink it? Not really. Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. And I said, I'll come, because I knew that I wasn't going to go to the meeting the next day, the Sunday. I wasn't going to go to that meeting. But he was like, this guy is going to be there. He's going to be giving a speech on Sunday about his book. Now, I can say to you, and if you want to edit it out, you can. I'd prefer you do, but if you don't want to, that's fine. I'll tell you that you'll be the exclusive person I've told, because I haven't told anybody his name. I've kind of alluded to who he is, because you can look him up, because I've said the name of his book. But his name is Ray Skamansky. Mm-hmm. And he wrote the book, 50 Shades of Grays. Ha ha ha, play on words.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha. He's so funny. So this guy, to give a little bit of background, worked for 25 years at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as a civilian scientific contractor, as a scientist on the base, working on various programs. Mm-hmm. He did hold a top secret clearance. His story is that he, in high school, got put there to through high school through a co-op program, and that's basically how he got his job later on, because he made some relationships there. So he worked there for 25 years. He just recently, in the last couple of years, has retired, and he wrote this book because he wanted to get down to the nitty-gritty on what the UFO phenomenon was, mm-hmm. So he was going to be at this thing that was in Burton, Michigan, at this dive bar, and I show up, and I was a little bit late because I live an hour and like 10 minutes away from Burton, so it took me a little bit longer to get there. But I got there, and he's there, and there's a guy sitting to the right of me. I don't know his name, but he was a scientist here in Michigan who was very interested in the UFO topic because he had about a missing time, but he wasn't a abductee or experiencer type that he dwelled on. He just kind of wrote it off as, I had this missing time, and I don't know what happened to that time, and I don't even know if I saw a UFO. Then there's the guy sitting across from him, Dan Warner, and I can say his name because you can see his footage in the new Stephen Greer documentary, Undocumented. It's featured in that documentary.
That's the unacknowledged?
Yeah, he shot here in Michigan locally on at least 10 to 15 different occasions because he's got some really pimped out night vision goggles and cameras. That he has shot, I guess you would say, either are man-made UFOs or whatever, alien, if you want to call them that, alien UFOs. And actually, you could see one of his videos on YouTube on Open Minds, or just type in Rochester UFO taken with night vision, and that's Dan Warner's work. And some of his work was in unacknowledged. So he's not super tight with Stephen Greer, but he knows who he is, and he's worked with him a little bit because obviously he supplied some of this footage for the movie Unacknowledged. And then sitting next to Dan Warner was this gentleman who, again, I don't know his name, but he was a very interesting person because he approached the subject from a totally different way. He was a remote viewer, and he would remote view different things. He was not a government remote viewer. He was trained by government people or former government people on remote viewing and has had really wild experiences. And then there was Ray Skamansky at the head of the table, sitting to the left of me was the state director of Michigan MUFON. So I immediately, when people kind of introduced each other or got introduced, it kind of rose a red flag to me personally, because I'm like, why? I mean, yes, these are just all Michigan people who are interested in UFOs. That's interesting. That's cool. But why are, we have three abductees, me, the state director, and the guy who's missing time. You have the guy who is the Stephen Greer contact, and then you have this remote viewer, and then you have Ray Skamansky, who is the senior scientist at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So, long story short, Ray starts to ask people in depth, what made you get into this field? What got you interested? He came to me and I told him my experience, the same experience I told you. And he was like, he kept dwelling on certain things. And I'm like, listen, man, I don't know. I'm just telling you what I remember. No, I'm not going under hypnosis. He kept saying, why don't you go under hypnosis? I'm like, because I don't feel that I want to, because it can open Pandora's box. And if I'm remembering it consciously, then that's pretty good. I don't need to be put under. He also gave a hard time to Dan Warner, the Stephen Greer guy. Really, with his footage, he kept saying, no, you're just shooting experimental aircraft. That's all you're shooting. And Dan's like, yeah, I probably am, but it's still interesting. They're flying over here in Michigan. Why are they flying over? And then he kind of didn't really pick on too much the remote viewer, but the remote viewer just kind of got the sense of this guy, Ray Skamansky, is not who he says he is. And he only said that to me and Dan when Ray went to use the restroom. And we even mentioned to the state director, what's up with this guy? And the state director basically just said to me and the other guys, just calm down. He's fine. He's just ribbing you a little bit, no big deal. So he just kept asking question after question on everybody, just trying to get like every ounce of detail out of everybody. But when you would ask a question of him or his book, he would clam up faster than you could say a clam. He wouldn't give anything. The only thing he would give is his sighting and the fact that he thinks that they kept stuff at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, UFO related. Well, whoop-de-doo, we know that. I could read a book and tell you that. So I kind of challenged him. I said, well, what do you think about Leonard Stringfield's work about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base with the jawbone that was re-put together, that was crushed by a dentist that was given this skull, or part of a skull, of a lower jawbone, I should say, of a skull that was not human. And he's like, oh, that's all crap. I'm like, well, Leonard Stringfield was pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't think he was just lying about everything. And then when I mentioned Tom Carey and Don Schmidt, oh my God, he had a field day. He was like, oh, see, they're related to the Roswell slides. That's all crap. They're both crap. All their books are crap. The book about Wright Patterson Air Force Base, it just has nothing but untruths. I'm like, oh, this is weird. Why is he going after these guys so bad? Like, I mean, yes, if you don't believe them, that's fine, and you can just say I don't believe them and move on. But he was going after them, so I'm like, this is weird. So I mentioned to the state director, I go, what is this guy's problem? Why is he so like angry with everything I bring up? He's like, oh no, he's just he knows his stuff. I'm like, yeah, well, I know my stuff too. I'm not just some punk kid. You know, I'm 37 years old. I've researched just as much as he has, maybe even more, and I've experienced stuff. I'm not saying like he hasn't, but why is he poo-pooing on everybody here? So basically, the only question that he kind of answered through the entire night of anybody's questions was mine about mill labs. And I found that very interesting. I asked him point blank, I go, do you think mill labs could be a real phenomenon? Could they be real? He said, absolutely. And I was like, whoa, how so? He goes, we have a lot of mothballed Air Force and military sites around the U.S. that we don't use anymore. And it's easy for people to just be put there and they wouldn't know where they were, and you could do whatever you wanted to them and they wouldn't be able to do anything because there's nobody at the base, right? Because it's mothballed. It's there and it's ready to be used, but there's not a staffing it except for whoever your abductors are. And I said, who told you this? He said, an Air Force guy who I know. I'm like, okay, well, are you prepared to say his name or anything? No, but I'll just tell you that he told me that is definitely what they could do. I said, no, you're not confusing this like with rendition, what they do with the war on terror stuff. He goes, no, they do that too. I said, interesting. So later on, I got to Tom Delonge, because this is when the Tom Delonge stuff was kind of really bubbling to the surface because of the WikiLeaks stuff. So I started asking Ray about the General McCaslin, who worked at Wright Patterson Air Force Base, and he would work there at the same time as Ray Skamansky, basically right before Ray retired. And I said, do you know him? No, I've never seen him, never heard of him. I wouldn't know who. He doesn't even look like he worked at the base. I said, really? He goes, yeah. Furthermore, Tom Delonge, he's just being fed BS. I go, but there's these WikiLeaks. Have you been paying attention to any of this? No, because I don't need to, because it's all crap. I said, okay, that's fine. That's your opinion. So again, fast forward now to the end of the night, where Ray basically, he goes to the bathroom, I leave, Dan Warner and I leave together, because we have at that point have had enough of being berated and asked a billion questions about us, but then when we ask him something, he doesn't really give us anything other than that one answer. Mm-hmm. Dan and I go, Dan, what do you think? And Dan immediately said, there's no freaking way that he's not a spook. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, Stephen Greer, and again, I know people don't like Stephen Greer. I'm not saying that I do or don't. I'm just saying Stephen Greer has had contact with certain individuals who you would call spooks. And this, because Dan had worked with Stephen on Unacknowledged, definitely this fit the bill. So then I'm like, yeah, I think possibly you're right. Maybe he is a spook. So long story short, he was on Open Minds Radio with Alejandro Rojas, I don't know, a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. And then he goes on that podcast and he goes and says that basically McCaslin was a nobody general and that he had a grudge against the Air Force. I'm like, first you tell me you don't even know who he is. He didn't exist. And now you're saying he had a grudge. what are you talking about? So I contacted Alejandro and I said, hey, I had this meeting with Ray Skamansky and he's peddling this stuff. Like he is playing it like he knew McCaslin when he told me and people in front of me that he didn't. And I have witnesses to say that he didn't. And basically Alejandro said, well, maybe he just misspoke. I said, no. He didn't misspeak. He definitely told us that McCaslin was a nobody and that he never heard of him, and then he probably didn't even work at the base. So I found that really odd that all of a sudden he goes on Open Minds podcast and he starts saying that McCaslin was a nobody when he told, or he was a disgruntled general, and he wasn't even a general, he was demoted. I'm like, what? Oh my God, this guy, he's just this crazy person. So
well, you think he's spreading disinformation at every chance he gets, or?
I do, because here's the other thing that really lit him up like a firecracker is when I mentioned, I know you know this case, the Bentwaters case. When I mentioned Larry Warren, and I know that's a really hot button topic right now, I know that. But when I mentioned that, he basically said, what Jim Peniston says is gospel. I said, so you're telling me and telling everybody here, including the state director who does not think that, not that the state director is really anybody. I mean, I like Bill, but it's not like he's some kind of expert. But you're telling us that Jim Peniston's recollection of the events with the time travelers from the Ancient Aliens episode is the true what happened there. Yep. What? I said, so basically John Burroughs, Adrian Bustinza, Larry Warren, the other guys there, I can't think of their names right now, that's all BS. Yep. I'm like, okay, so you're telling me John Burroughs went out there with Jim Peniston and basically is lying? Yeah. Whatever Peniston says is the gospel. That is the truth. I go, who are you getting this from? Colonel Halt told me basically that's who I should believe. I said, I see. Interesting. So I've mentioned this to a few people. In fact, I was on a podcast not too long ago with Peter Robbins. I didn't bring it up to him then, but I would like to ask Peter, even though he's kind of disavowed Larry Warren, he really hasn't disavowed him. There's some discrepancies. I'll just leave it at that, both on both parties. I just think that really, honestly, the whole Bentwaters case, I think the reason why we'll never get to the bottom of that case is because it represents something that we can easily, there's so much evidence, there's so many witnesses, and there's so much of a paper trail that whoever doesn't want that to get out, so they're going to muddy the waters any way they can. So I believe Ray Skamansky is one of those people that is muddying the waters because he's touting everywhere he goes. Because for the longest time, he never had a Facebook. And just recently, he has gotten a Facebook. And this is another thing that I find very weird, okay? And it doesn't make him a spook just because he doesn't do this, but it is interesting that he doesn't do this. Usually I know that you have a Facebook and it's kind of a private one and you don't have everybody and their brother that's the paranormal or UFO, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. But when you're a researcher, you friend other researchers and you converse with them, right? Mm-hmm. Ray Skamansky only has 4 other so-called research friends that are friends, and the rest are people that I don't know. They're probably really his friend. But I find that really interesting because if you're a guy who is out there, who's an author, who is touting this stuff, and you say you're a researcher and you want to bounce ideas off of people, wouldn't you think you want to friend as many UFO researchers, even if you disagree with some of what they say, just to basically be in a community? Nope. He's only got the 4, and I forget what 4 people there are. And here's another weird thing. His profile picture is not him. It's some old guy. but it is his Facebook. It is his personal Facebook. So I found that really odd. So,
yeah, that's strange. I wonder why that would be.
yeah, I don't know. The guy, and every interview he's done, with the exception of the Open Minds one, when he got interviewed, he gave very little information on his book. It was like the interview person had to pull stuff out of him to even move the conversation forward. It was such a weird conversation. There was one, because I did my homework. I mean, I wasn't going to go to dinner with some weirdo. These other people, I didn't know who they were, because obviously the state director didn't tell me their names. So the only guy who gave me his name, I'm going to look him up on the internet. I'm not some stupid person. I'm going to do my homework. So I did, and I found a couple interviews of him. And like I said, he did not give very much information. And then, like I said, when he was eating dinner and having a beer with us, he just would not give us much. And then the little bits that he would were like jaw-dropping, because it was like, you won't tell us about your book, but you'll tell us about that? That's weird. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it is interesting that I found that you have these individuals at this quote-unquote unofficial meeting that Michigan MUFON had, and that he is the guy who's going to be there. It's kind of odd. I've also found out, by the way, the same woman who is in Ryan Sprague's book in Michigan, the one who I believe was a Gangstalk,
Mm-hmm.
she has told me, because we've talked a few times, actually quite a few times about this, that Michigan MUFON has been infiltrated on many occasions, because she has had cases where people have tried to steal her information, her files out of her house, or discredit her in any way within Michigan MUFON, which is really weird. And when I went to the one and only meeting I went to, it was a weird get up. I don't know. It was my first and only UFO conference, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a weird time. So it was interesting that she told me that she felt the same way, that Michigan MUFON had been infiltrated by people, elements of who knows, I don't know. But when I went there, it looked like the old folks' home, basically. But maybe I didn't see the spooks, or maybe they were the spooks. I don't know.
Wow.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I think our conversations come full circle. I would love it, absolutely love it, if you could send me any contact info for someone who would be willing to check out that photo.
I will do that. Let me find out some people, trying to dwindle down the list of who I really think that could get to the bottom of this for you. Because I'm not just going to send it. The thing the thing that would bother me is, like, if I send it to Mark Dan Antonio, he may just say, and not want to have anything to do with it, because he gets pictures all the time. So let me see who I can get, and I'll be discreet about it. I'm not just going to say, hey, everybody, look what I got. So, all right.
Well,
so,
and just so you know, I mean, I've had a couple people look at it that I know who are, they try to photograph, ghosts, or, spirits or whatever, when we go out on these investigations. They've kind of said, it leans towards being stronger. They don't see any evidence of tampering. However, their concerns were the same as mine. I think with the not being able to see the reflection in that mirror. But it could just be that, the angle.
Yeah, so it's and the resolution may not be great. I do know from the Camellia book, the only time that Damien saw the person or the silhouette was in a mirror. Mm-hmm. When he had had his medicine cabinet tilted a certain way, is when he saw their silhouette. He didn't see the person. He just saw the silhouette of the figure that would make up the person.
Right.
So, yeah, you definitely need to read that book and find it. On Amazon, I had to get mine from a third-party seller. It took 2 weeks to get it. Yeah. I know you can go to the website, and you can get right from their website, the book's website. If you want me to send that information, I can to you.
Yeah,
I think it would be a lot easier than Amazon, because Amazon, it looked like it was either sold out or it was only third-party sellers. So
Yeah. Yeah, maybe you never know. I might try to get this guy on the show. And
Yeah, Robert Guffey, definitely, you have to save at least an hour and a half
yeah.
because it is a jaw-dropping time.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
he's local. Maybe I could even meet up with him.
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Well, thanks. I hate to cut it short. I'm getting the
Yeah,
signal
no
from the
problem.
family that dinner's ready here.
All right.
But yeah, let's. Gosh, every time I speak with you, I find myself wanting to chat with you more. But let's keep in touch and perhaps get you back on in the near future.
All right, sounds good, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Once again, that was Chris Wolford. I just want to send a huge thanks out to him for joining us, as well as helping to provide a couple of connections for me to obtain independent opinions on the photo we discussed. After we recorded this conversation, Chris sent the image to a couple of people, and I believe he's still waiting for an opinion from a third person. The first person to evaluate it is a digital photographer with a background in image analysis. And he states, and I quote, "The pixel count seems to be the same between the image and background, and there's no sign of merging, which is a Photoshop method. The image seems to be in proportion with the background, so I think the image is actually on the picture. The only thing, the light is blocking half the image on the ground, which is not typical to the images I have seen before. If it's fake, someone is really good on Photoshop." He goes on in a separate text to state, "The fact the image is being blocked could indicate a cloaking device. Most ghosts of similar nature don't have that, so very interesting indeed." Chris sent the photo to a second person as well. According to Chris, this person stated he didn't want anything to do with the photo after looking at it. He believed the photo to be real and not photoshopped in any way. I'll definitely keep you all updated on the photo as I receive more information, and I'll let you know what any additional sources uncover. As I stated before in the beginning of this episode, in order to attempt to confirm its authenticity, I welcome anyone's feedback. I am by no means an expert in photographic analysis, so spread the word and try to debunk this photo, which I thought was initially some great evidence of a ghost. At the very least, it's truly eye-catching, and if you're like me, it will leave you scratching your head. This episode just had a ton of links mentioned, in addition to the photograph, that I'll have in my show notes over at deviatus.com. Please make sure to rate and review the show in iTunes or your favorite podcatcher, and give me an honest opinion about the contents and guests I've been having on. I really am open to suggestions about how I can make the show more enjoyable for you. As always, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at DeviatusPod, as well as on my Facebook page. Please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes coming out. And feel free to send me an email if you like with any guest suggestions, questions, or just to say hi. Or if you have a paranormal story to tell me yourself, I welcome that too. I'm at deviatuspod@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and have another great week.